Hey friends, and welcome to class. I wanted to jump in and give a lecture over the Peloponnesian Wars. And so the Peloponnesian Wars will cap off our study of the Greek civilization. And next week we will look at the Hellenistic age. That's the next stage in our review of ancient history. And so before we jump into the Peloponnesian Wars, let us review everything that we have walked through with the Greek civilization. We started with Bronze Age Greece, the Greeks before the Greeks, and we looked at Minoan Crete. We looked at Minoan Crete and Mycenaean Greece, and we looked at Theseus and the Minotaur to help kind of illustrate the relationship between Mycenaean Greece and Minoan Crete. And then we moved on. We did not talk about this. We moved on to Archaic Greece, and we talked about the epic, Homer and Hesiod. We talked about the polis and the whole structure of the Greek civilization and how it is structured on the polis, the city-state, and how each city-state is independent. And then we looked at trade and colonization, how the Greeks moved away from Greece and into the surrounding areas, the surrounding coastlands, and had cultural contact with the Phoenicians, developed their alphabet, and so on. And then we took a close look at the city-states of Delphi and Olympia and how they depict for us, they illustrate for us the polis and how all that works and what purposes those city-states served in the Greek culture. And then we took a zoomed in look at Sparta and Athens and the reforms of both of those cities. That was really important. We looked at the reforms of Lycurgus and how he developed Sparta into a militarized state. And then we looked at the reforms of Solon, Pisistratus, and Cleisthenes, and how they formed Athens into a democratic city-state. And then we finally looked at Themistocles, who really was responsible for the building of the Athenian navy, which we will take a closer look at today. Then we moved over into the Persian Wars, which was a really exciting series of battles that took place as Darius and Xerxes invaded Greece and were both repelled by the Athenians and the Spartans and the other city-states when they formed their alliance to expel the Persians. And they were successful. And then we looked at the ensuing age, the classical age of Greek civilization that happened due to the successes with the expulsion of the Persian forces. So we looked at Greek religion. We looked at the festivals and the dramas that went on during the festivals. We looked at the building of the Greek civilization and the architecture within the Greeks. And then we looked at sculpture and how there was like this classical age, this glorious age of sculpture and arts and so on. Okay, well, the 5th century closes in ancient Greece with a very tumultuous time, and we call this time the Peloponnesian Wars. It really took place during 30 or 40 years or so, during the end of the 5th century BC. That is to say, 400-ish to about 430, 440 BC. So in that era, so starting in 440 BC all the way through is the Peloponnesian Wars. Let us go ahead and jump in. So let us first look at the Hellenic League. These are the names that historians have given this league. A league is an alliance, a group of city-states in this case that are allying together for a similar cause. Okay, Hellenic once again is the Greek name for Greece, so this is basically the Greek League. And again, they didn't call themselves the Hellenic League, but they did nevertheless combine forces in order to provide a united defense. And so that's what happened. The Hellenic League was formed. It was formed by free city-states as a free alliance in order to present a united defense against the Persian invasion. So let's take a zoomed-in look at Thermopylae and which forces comprised the defense of that location. It's not really a town, Thermopylae. It's a place. So of course we know about the 300 Spartans. They comprised the defensive force. Let's go full screen here. There we go. The Spartans comprised, 300 Spartans comprised the defensive force to slow down Xerxes in his invasion of Athens. And then other Lacedaemonians, 900 or so. Spartan Helots, 900 or so. Mantineans, and these are all other city-states. Tegeans, Arcadian, Arcadians, other Arcadians, Corinthians, Phleons, Mycenaeans. So you can see they sent a number of troops to help this cause. Continuing is Thespians, Malians, and so on and so forth. These are the city-states that sent in troops to help with the defense of Thermopylae. And then at Salamis, various city-states sent ships to help with that battle as well. So Athens supplied 180 ships, and so it was primarily the Athenian navy which engaged in that battle. But all these other city-states supplied ships as well, and to help the cause of repelling the Persian navy. Okay, and then at Plataea, we also have a bunch of forces being supplied by all the city-states in Greece. So obviously 10,000 Spartans, that was the elite fighting force, and that was the lion's share of the infantry that helped win that battle. Athens, another 8,000, and so on and so forth. But you get the idea that there was a league, an alliance of Greek city-states coming together to repel Persia. Okay, well, what became of that alliance shortly after the Persian Wars? So Darius gets defeated at Marathon. Xerxes marches his 1,000,000 men over the Hellespont and around the Aegean Sea and invades at Thermopylae and sacks Athens, loses at Salamis, and loses at Plataea, and goes back home. After the Greek success of Persia, this Hellenic League splits into two, and that is the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League. So we'll first take a look at the Delian League. The Delian League lasts from 478 BC to 404 BC. Okay, and it originally was a free alliance, free to join, free to leave, etc. And it was originally formed to free Ionian Greeks from Persian control. Reminder, the Ionian Greeks are there on the coast of Asia Minor, and they were under Persian control. So the Delian League was formed in order to free the Ionian Greeks from Persian control, because, as we've discussed, in the 400s BC, the Greeks celebrated the fact that they were free, slaves to no king. Athens was chosen as a leader of this alliance. Very important detail. And this alliance was centered at the island of Delos. And that's why historians call it the Delian League. Let's take a look at Delos and where it happens to be. So let's get oriented here. This is a map of the Aegean Sea. Here is the Aegean Sea. I'm circling it with my mouse. Here is Attica and the city of Athens there. There's the island of Salamis, where the Battle of Salamis took place in this strait between the two. Here is the Peloponnesian Peninsula, where Sparta is. Okay, and this is the rest of Greece. Up north is Macedon, up here. This is the Hellespont. This is Asia Minor. This whole landmass is Asia Minor, small Asia. And on the coast are a bunch of Greek city-states that forms the Ionian coast. And Persia is in charge of the Ionian city-states, which are Greek. Well, at the island of Delos, which is right here in the middle of the Aegean Sea, the Delian League is formed, or that is the headquarters for the Delian League. And that's where the treasury is kept, and the treasury is the collection of money, silver, gold, etc., and coins, which the Delian League has charge over. Okay? And so that's all there is to that little point. The point was that the Delian League is a free alliance of a bunch of city-states, Greek city-states. Athens is the leader, and it is centered at Delos. That's where the meetings are held. That's where the governance is done. That's where the treasury is. All the money, all the finances of the league are held at Delos. Okay, and the first objective is to free the Ionian city-states, the Greek Ionian city-states, from Persian control. Okay, well, there's a shift between 478 and 454 BC from league to empire. Let's define the terms. A league is a free alliance. An empire is a group of city-states, in this case, that is ruled by an emperor or a member of that organization. Let's just take a look at what exactly it is. In 476, the Delian League, which is a free league, right, expels a Persian garrison at Aeon. Aeon is this little city-state up here in the North Aegean. There was a Persian stronghold there, and the Delian League went and expelled those Persian forces there. Great. In 475, the League conquers and colonizes Skyros. That's interesting. The League goes in and takes an island and colonizes it. Okay? So 473, Athens forces Charistos to join the League. In 470, Naxos, a city-state, attempts a revolt, attempts to leave the Delian League, and Athens lays siege and forces compliance. So Athens brings its boats over to Naxos and says, no, you may not revolt. And so they force compliance and they force a tribute to the League. Thasos, another city-state, an island, rich in trees, revolts. Athens lays siege and forces compliance once again. So by 465, the Delian League is no longer a free alliance. In 454, Pericles, we'll look at him a little later, moves the Delian treasury from Delos to Athens and begins an enormous building campaign in Athens on the Acropolis, which we'll look at later. Okay, and so there you have it. From 478 to 454, we have the shift from a free league to an empire, where Athens is in control of all of these city-states, and they're supplying of boats and food and money to this league, which is actually the Athenian Empire. There are three means of empire, and what I mean by that is ways to achieve empire. Number one, tribute. I've mentioned it a second ago. Now let's get specific about it. Other city-states, the islands in the Aegean and other city-states that were a part of this Delian League, this Athenian Empire, would supply silver or ships and men, and that would be considered their tribute. Okay? And it was an exchange program, right? You supply this money, we provide you from protection from Sparta, from other city-states, from Persia, etc. So that's great. You give money, we give you protection. You give ships or men, we give you protection. Great. And it's an exchange. 700 magistrates oversaw the collection of this tribute. They would go out in boats to these islands, collect the money, and bring it back. So tribute collectors, okay? And then you had fleets and you had garrisons. And it was the muscle behind the official decrees. And so the fleets, these boats, these triremes, hundreds of them, hundreds of triremes. And garrisons, little towns where the navy would be stationed to enforce the decrees, to provide tribute, to provide ships and men. Let's look at Pericles. He was a man. He was a Greek man. And he was a statesman, a politician, if you will. In 449, Pericles begins using the league tribute to fund a massive building program. That was a bullet point from previous, and so here it is again. Remember, he moved the treasury from the island of Delos to Athens, and it happened to be in the Parthenon. So 5,000 talents were used to rebuild the Acropolis. A talent was a massive amount of money. The way that you would measure a talent is basically it's a jar full of silver. And so you'd take a Greek pot. We've been looking at pots, Greek pottery throughout this class. And you would fill that pot with silver coins, and that would be a talent of silver, 1 talent. It's a ton of money. It would be considered a year's wage, I think. Maybe 20 years' wage. That's what it was. 20 years' wage. So 1 talent equals 1 man's 20 years of wages. 5,000 of those talents. You want to do the math? Let's do the math. Let's find my calculator. I'm going to pause the video and find my calculator. I've unpaused the video. So 1 talent is 20 years' wages for 1 man. Okay, 20. 5,000 talents. That is 100,000 years' wages to rebuild the Acropolis. Let us proceed. The powerful navy of Athens achieved democracy at home. That's fine. But imperialism abroad, which means in Athens itself, we have a democracy. We have Athenian men gathering together at the ecclesia, remember, the assembly, and they would enact law. But those men, this one city, achieved imperialism abroad. You wouldn't invite any other men from any other city-state to the assemblies. Only Athenian men at the assembly. And so that's what that means. Democracy at home, imperialism abroad. So let's look at Pericles' Acropolis. A bunch of these things, all of these things still stand today. The Acropolis is gorgeous. And Pericles adopted this building program with 500 talents of Delian League money, Athenian Empire money, and rebuilds the Acropolis. Okay, first we have the Parthenon. We've already discussed the Parthenon. Beautiful building, beautiful structure made out of marble columns. They're gorgeous. Again, they're uneven, so that it would provide a trick to the brain to make it look even. Really weird. Incredible architecture to make something uneven that appeared even. Here is a bird's eye view of the Acropolis, modern day Parthenon rather. The roof has been destroyed. It was sacked by a bunch of people, Persians, Turks, etc. And so here is the structure of the Parthenon. And then here's more of the Parthenon. And here's like an older photo from maybe the 40s or the 70s or something. This is like a cannonball or something like that came in and destroyed these pillars. Let's move on. Here is Athena inside of the Parthenon. This is actually no longer there because this robe of gold was dismantled and melted and taken as spoils of war from somebody. So Athena is no longer there. This is the statue of Athena in Nashville. There is a replica of the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. I highly recommend that you go to ask your parents to go to Nashville and go to the Parthenon. Inside of the Parthenon is a statue of Athena. We've talked about the procession that culminated in the granting of Athena her new robe. And so this statue of Athena was standing inside of the Parthenon. And then here is the front view of the Parthenon, I believe. It might be the rear. I don't know. But you have the columns here. And here's the frieze. The frieze is depicting the procession, remember? And here is another beautiful frieze of more sculptures depicting the Greek pantheon. Amazing. And so this is what Pericles is able to achieve with those 5,000 talents. He rebuilds, or he constructs and expands the Parthenon. Okay, then this is the Erechtheum. This is a smaller structure that is on the Acropolis next to the Parthenon. If you look at this photo of the bird's eye view of the Parthenon, here is the Erechtheum. So it's right there. Let's see if we can go over. There we go. We're back. This is the Erechtheum, and I don't remember what it was for. You'd have to look it up. And here are the caryatids that are holding up this balcony portico. We've also looked at those. He also builds the Propylaea, which is the gates to the Acropolis. A beautiful structure that served as the gates. So here is the Parthenon once again, and this is the Propylaea underneath it. And so I remember when we toured the Acropolis, when Oliver was probably a month and a half old, I had him sitting on my back. I had a picture of that somewhere. Maybe I'll find it later. We climbed up this Propylaea and waited in this line and entered the Acropolis after paying a fee, I'm sure, and then going and checking out the Parthenon, etc. Here is the inside of the Propylaea, looking out, I think. Here is an artist's rendering of the original Propylaea. Beautiful gates here, leading up to incredible steps, leading to another set of gates. Here is, by the way, this is Nike's temple, I think. It's a smaller temple. Nike, again, is the god of victory. Oh, we'll see Nike here. My mistake. I should have pointed this out a second ago. Here's the statue of Athena. In Athena's hand is Nike, the god of victory. So Athena was also considered the goddess of victory. Here is another image of the Propylaea. The steps leading up to the gates. And here is the temple of Nike being worked on. Here is another view of the Propylaea. I give you a lot of views of the Propylaea. Here we are. Great. And all done. Yes, the Acropolis is gorgeous. It is an architectural masterpiece, but it was kind of achieved by tyranny. The Delian League was once a free league, and then Athens just kind of seizes control over the league and forces other city-states to comply, to give tribute, to give boats, to give men. And then Pericles basically steals the funds of the Delian League and the funds that were provided by the city-states to Athens, and he takes it to Athens and makes Athens and the Acropolis the literal treasury of the league, making it essentially an Athenian empire. He uses those funds to build a beautiful Acropolis that we can still enjoy today. So it was built through unjust means, misappropriated league funds, and the Acropolis was second, by the way. You need to know this. The crowning achievement of Greece is not the Acropolis. That's the second crowning achievement of the ancient civilization of Greece. The crowning achievement of Greece is the navy and the Piraeus, which is the navy city of Athens. Let us move on. So you not only have the Hellenic League being split into the Delian League, but you also have the Hellenic League being split into the Peloponnesian League. And that is the league that is based on the Peloponnesian Peninsula, and it is the contrast to the Delian League, which is controlled by Athens. The Peloponnesian League will be controlled by Sparta. It goes from 600s to 365 BC. And here is another map of the Aegean. Once again, we have the Aegean Sea. Everything in red over here on Asia Minor is the Ionian coast. And then we have Attica here. This map shows us the Delian League, the Athenian Empire. Everything in red is that which is controlled by Athens. Okay? All right. Everything in yellow is that which is controlled by Sparta and the Peloponnesian League. Everything in green is neutral. And here we have the neutral up here in mainland Greece. I don't know what purple is. purple looks to be Thessaly. We aren't looking at Thessaly one bit. So let us move on. Right now we're looking at the Peloponnesian League, which is the League of City-States centered on the Peloponnesus, the Peloponnesian Peninsula. So Sparta maintained control of this league, and it's governed, the Peloponnesian League is governed by two bodies. Number one, the Spartiates. We've looked at these guys. These are the ones that are in control of Sparta. These are the elite Spartans, starting with the older men, going all the way down to all of the Spartiates, the elite fighting force, the men of the city-state of Sparta. And the Council of Allies. Each polis in the alliance had one vote regardless of size. No tribute was collected with the Peloponnesian League unless it was wartime. And only Sparta could call councils. And Sparta chose whether to comply with council decisions or not. So, there you have it. That's the Peloponnesian League. Much shorter. Okay, excuse the yawning. Okay, let's take a look at the Peloponnesian Wars. And we're going to start by looking at two guys, Cimon and Pericles. We get our name Simon from Cimon, but in the Greek alphabet, the kappa is pronounced k, and the sigma is pronounced s. So we don't actually have a c in Greek. We only have a kappa and we have a sigma. So you spell this name with a kappa, so we pronounce it Cimon. He lived from 510 to 450 BC. His father was Miltiades, a marathonomachoi, if you remember. That is a fighter at marathon and a champion at marathon, famous man. And Cimon was a hero at Salamis. He helped, I think, I'm going to pause and check my facts before I say what I'm about to say. Okay, I'm glad I didn't say it, because all Wikipedia says is that during the Battle of Salamis, Cimon distinguished himself by his bravery. So I was going to say that he led a ship. I don't know, but let us continue with Cimon. So he was a hero at Salamis. He distinguished himself for his bravery. He was a military hero of the Delian League. He led the capture of Ion and Skyros. We talked about that a second ago. And he brought back the bones of Theseus from Skyros. We know about Theseus. Theseus, the hero that rescued the Athenian city-state from the grip of Minos and the Minotaur. So, Theseus's bones were in Skyros, and Cimon brought them back to Athens. And he led the Battle of Eurymedon. Eurymedon was kind of a cleanup battle where he went to Eurymedon, an Ionian Greek city-state, to wrest them from Persian control. And Cimon was very anti-Persian. And he sought Greek unity. He sought Ionian freedom. So that's very important to know about Cimon. He was anti-Persia, not anti-Sparta. He was pro-Sparta, pro-Greek Hellenic League alliance kind of thing. Let's all get together because our enemy is not each other. Our enemy is Persia. Very important. In 464 BC, there was a massive earthquake in Sparta. And if you remember how Sparta's society is comprised, Spartiates up top, Spartan citizens below them, and then the Helots below them. Remember the Messenian Helots? What happens when there's natural disasters occurring in that kind of a society? The Helots, the slaves, the serf class, right? Revolt, looting, chaos, pandemonium, etc. So, Sparta has a Messenian, a Helot revolt on their hands. And you future monarchs know well that what you're going to do when you have a revolt in your nation is you need to quell the revolt. You need to re-subjugate the revolutionaries. Okay? So that's important. Okay. So, while they are engaged in this natural disaster, trying to re-subjugate the Helots, Cimon marches from Athens with a bunch of hoplites saying, "Hey, Sparta, we're here to help you. We're going to help you re-subjugate the Helots. Sparta doesn't trust Cimon. So Sparta sends them away. And Cimon has to go back to Athens with his tail between his legs, ashamed, humiliated by Sparta. Remember, Cimon was pro-Spartan. He was going to help out. And Sparta said, no, I have to pause the video. Okay, sorry, I was getting a phone call and I used my phone for my camera, so the video stopped, I think. When did we last stop? We stopped with Cimon is coming to help Sparta. Pure intentions, probably. Sparta didn't trust him, sends him home, spurns him. He's humiliated. He goes back to Athens, and Athens is mad because Cimon had to convince Athens to send forces to Sparta to help them. They didn't want to do that. And he said, let's do it because we'll resolve conflict here and be a team again and go fight Persia. And they said, fine. Well, Cimon goes and tries to help, and then he's ushered away, right? Okay. So the response of Athens with this humiliation, they got mad at Cimon and ostracized him. Do we remember what ostracized is? There should be a thing here. Oh, we're not on the screen. There we go. There is an ostracon. Bingo. So this is an actual pottery shard with Cimon's name on it. Cimon Mystiado or something like that. That's Cimon's name. And so they broke the pottery shards, wrote his name on it, and succeeded. They succeeded in ostracizing him. So he was supposed to leave Athens in like 6 days, and he was supposed to leave for 10 years. You can't come back for 10 years. All right. Pericles, who lived from 495 to 429 BC, who was anti-Spartan, he comes in to fill the vacuum. If you know anything about vacuums, they're filled by stuff. There was a void left when Cimon leaves Athens, and Pericles walks in and takes control. So Pericles, we have some stuff with Pericles. This didn't quite work. Let me fix this real quick. We're back. So, Pericles, he was anti-Spartan. Not pro-Persian, but anti-Spartan. And he fostered the Athenian Empire. We looked at how he took funds from Delos and put them in Athens and started this building program to make the Acropolis beautiful again. And he won a bunch of the Athenians over with his building program. And once Cimon was ostracized, he comes in and fills the void. And he expanded the long walls to Piraeus. Remember, Themistocles convinced Athens to build long walls to the Piraeus. He expanded them. And once again, the Piraeus is the port city of Athens. This is where the navy is housed. The navy would come home every day. They would pull the ships up onto the beach. And during the winter, they would store them in a big boathouse. Well, Pericles expanded these walls that connected the Piraeus to the Acropolis so that no matter what happened, the Acropolis would always be connected to its port city and would be able to escape or whatever, get supplies with the navy from the Piraeus. All right, so that's what happened. Pericles sought Athenian expansion westward toward Sparta, toward the rest of Greece, and toward Sicily and Italy, etc. Pericles focuses Athenian hatred toward Sparta. So Cimon, who was pro-Spartan, anti-Persian, wanted to make peace in Greece and take the war that way to Persia. Pericles comes in and he wants to beat up on Sparta. Okie dokie. So, first Cimon, then Pericles is the real answer to that question. Cimon and Pericles. I really wish this would... Oh, it is. We're good. Never mind. Moving on. Then we have war. The early stages of the Peloponnesian Wars, 460 to 445 BC. Athens' anger over the earthquake of 464. That's the first bullet point in my early stages section. When Cimon returns home, Athens is spurned and offended and insulted that Sparta didn't trust them to help. with the Messenian revolt that happened due to the earthquake. Sparta's fear continues over Athenian expansion. Okay? And then Athens begins ravaging the coastlines of the Peloponnesian cities. And that is an affront to Sparta. And then Cimon returns from exile and negotiates a 30 years peace between Athens and Sparta. Okay? All right. Here's a thing over here. We're not even going to even talk about it. And so, that's in 445 BC. Well, 13 years later, war breaks out, and this is how it occurs. In 432, Athens issues the Megarian Decree. The Megarian Decree. Megara was a city-state in mainland Greece right here. So if you see Athens, the Piraeus, and Megara is right around here, right in between Sparta and Athens. The Megarian Decree was issued by Athens to Megara as an act of revenge for desecrating a temple. And so Athens says, Megara, any citizen from Megara may no longer trade at the port of Piraeus, the Athenian marketplace, which it was an embargo, I guess you could say. So this crippled the Megarian economy. So Megara, the people of Megara, appealed to Sparta for help. And so Sparta said, you must lift the Megarian Decree, and issues an ultimatum to Athens. If you don't know what an ultimatum is, you actually do. Your parents use it all the time. You need to stop doing that, or else. You need to stop doing that, or I'm going to take your thing away, or whatever. You know what an ultimatum is. So Sparta issues an ultimatum to Athens to lift the Megarian Decree and allow Megara and Megarian citizens to trade in Athens once again. Athens refuses. And so Athens develops a plan to rely on the navy, and Sparta's plan is to rely on the land. And we have to go all the way back to our lecture on the distinctions between Athens and Sparta. Sparta has a series of social reforms to make Sparta into a militarized society. And they had an elite fighting force on land, the hoplite, right? With the shield, with the spear, the helmet, the whole thing, and the stabbing, and the phalanx, and all that. Athens, under Themistocles' guidance, builds the boats, patterned after Theseus. Theseus was the Athenian hero, the sailor man. And Athens built a navy and relied on their navy 100%. Yes, they had a fighting force, but they were not nearly as elite as Sparta. So, there you have the distinctives. They worked really well against Persia together. And now they're like fire and water, or whatever. Fire and ice. I don't know. Polar opposites, right? Where we have the land forces of Sparta and the navy forces of Athens. So Athens develops a plan to rely on their navy through the use of these long walls which connect Athens and the Piraeus. So let's think a little bit about how Athens is set up. Here is the city, and a bunch of people live inside the city. But a bunch of Athenians live outside of the city on farms. Okay? Their plan, because Sparta issues an ultimatum to lift the Megarian Decree, they say no. Their plan, if Sparta attacks, is we're fine. We're going to retreat, leave our farms, and we're going to retreat into the city of Athens, and we're going to be fine inside of our walled city. We'll be able to attack anybody who comes with our arrows and our spears, and we have access to the Piraeus, and we can leave in our boats at any time and be supplied by our ships with our navy. If Sparta wants to come and have a fight with us with their navy, yay. But we will not engage Sparta on land. That's the Athenian plan. Well, in 431, Sparta does come, and they ravage the Athenian countryside. They burn up farms, they destroy crops, they burn up the fields, and the Athenians, all the farmers, come into the city and retreat and are safe inside the walls. Well, Thucydides records for us Pericles' funeral speech and the plague breaking out. So what happens is all these people are crammed into the city. Plague breaks out, right? We know something or else about plagues, don't we? Plague breaks out. Everybody's coughing. Everybody's wearing masks, social distancing, all that. And it's unavoidable. Plague breaks out, and people are getting sick, and we're stressed. We're pretty stressed. Okay. In all this, the Athenians decide they need to go help out the Syracusans on Sicily. Sicily is the island below the boot of Italy. Okay, there is a Greek city-state, a colony, there by the name of Syracuse. And the Syracusans had dominated the other Greek city-states on the island. Well, the Agisterians begged for Athens to help defeat Syracuse. And Athens and Pericles, they get very excited. I'm going to pause the video for 1 second. So the Agisterians begged Athens to help defeat... Oh my gosh. Pause the video. So the Agisterians begged Athens to help defeat Syracuse. So the ambitious Athenians who want to colonize westward, they go and they try to help out the Agisterians. Agisteria is another city-state on Sicily, and they want to break the power of Syracuse. Alcibiades is a part of this group. Alcibiades is another name, but I think modern pronunciation is Alcibiades. He has unrestrained ambition, and Nicias is a different guy. He has prudent self-discipline. Alcibiades says, let's go. Nicias says, let's not. Let's have peace. And Alcibiades wins the day. So he leads a force over to Sicily to go invade Syracuse. And Athens chose to help the Agisterians in order to both expand west and to get rich. Well, Alcibiades is accused of sacrilege. It's kind of a funny story. One day, everyone wakes up in the city of Athens and they notice that their statues have been desecrated. The statues, a very specific part of the statues, were removed from the statues. So you know about the Greeks and how they like to work out in the nude, and you know about Greek sculpture and how they want to sculpt people in the nude. Well, the men sculptures have a part on them. And anyway, the Athenians wake up and those parts are missing from the statues. And they blame Alcibiades and his little punk friends of going throughout the city and removing those little parts from the statues. So he's ostracized. I'm going to pause the video and look at his ostracons and put them into the Prezi. 1 second. Well, that was disappointing. All we have is this. Come on. And this right here. There's a lambda. Kib. Anyway. Well, that's all we got. So, Athens exiles Alcibiades, and he defects to Sparta and encourages them to support Syracuse. Oh my gracious. Drama going on. So Alcibiades also encourages Sparta to set up a permanent garrison in Decelea, which is another city-state in Syracuse. Okay, Nicias leads a very confused Athenian army and hesitates to act. Remember, Nicias is the peaceful one, and he's not a very decisive commander, and so he hesitates and leads a very confused Athenian army and loses. Gylippus, the Spartan general, leads a very confident army and overtakes the Athenians. The Sicilian campaign was a classic overextension. The Athenians overestimated their empire, and they have to return to Athens in humiliated defeat. Even after the Sicilian disaster, Athens manages to recover. Alcibiades actually comes back into Athens and is very successful in rebuilding Athenian strength. Lysander, another dude, he sails to the Hellespont to cut off Athenian grain. Athens is forced to follow in order to defend their grain supply. Remember the Athenian plan? We're not growing wheat in the Athenian countryside in Attica. We're retreating into our city, and we're depending on the empire to supply the Piraeus with grain and to feed the Athenian people. Lysander, wisely, the Spartan general, goes to the Hellespont. I should include a map here. He goes to the Hellespont to go cut off the Athenian grain supply, so Athens has to chase after them to prevent them from doing that. In 405 BC, Athens loses at the Battle of Aegospotami. And in 404 BC, Athens surrenders to the city of Sparta. Corinth and Thebes wanted to enslave the Athenians and destroy their whole city, but Sparta shows kindness and spares the city and installs 30 tyrants to lead the city. So 30 tyrants from Sparta go to Athens, and they are in control of the city. Okay, so long story short, the Peloponnesian Wars end in 404 BC. Athens loses, Sparta wins, but it is a temporary situation. Here's the aftermath. Here's some political developments which occur after. So the results of the Peloponnesian War is that Sparta invades Athens in 404. Athens surrenders. Sparta prevails supreme over all Greek city-states and has hegemony. Hegemony is a fancy word for control over everything. From 404 to 386 BC, we have what's called the Corinthian War. 1. Sparta was growing too strong and began expanding into Asia Minor. 2. Thebes, Corinth, Athens, and Argos team up to fight against Sparta. Persia funds this expedition. Persian money is accepted by these 4 city-states to fight Sparta. The irony is insane. Athens takes advantage of success and begins recapturing old League islands. The Delian League is back. Persia stops supporting the Allies, withdraws their funding, and begins supporting Sparta once again. Desperate, Athens is desperate, the Allies then sought peace. And so we have a king's peace in 387 BC. Between Athens and Sparta guarded this peace and therefore took advantage of it, and they reassert Spartan hegemony. And after this, in 379 BC, Athens revives the Delian League. In 371, Thebans defeat the Spartans, release the Messenians, and establish Messene. Sparta crumbles. Thebes wins hegemony. In 364, a new league is formed to overthrow Thebes in the Battle of Mantinea, etc., etc., etc. Do you remember in the beginning, archaic Greece, when we talked about the polis? We talked about how there was constant stasis. Stasis is that equal and opposing forces, right? Here is Greek stasis. It is resolved for a minute while Persia invades, and they can... what's the fancy word, vocabulary word? Get along, not correlate. Collaborate. They can collaborate together to expel the Persian advance. And then they get back to infighting. That is the Greek way. Conflict, competition, stasis, agony, agon. Okay? So that's what's occurring here. In 338 BC, so fast forward like 30 years, Philip II of Macedon conquers and unites Greece at the Battle of Coronea. What is this next bullet point? I figured it was over. Let us zoom in real quick to this map here. This is Macedonia, Macedon. Philip II of Macedon starts to rise in power, and he brings Macedon down into Greece, and in their weakness, because of all the infighting, conquers Greece. All right. Let's look at some cultural developments in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian Wars. Amid the political turmoil, Athenian culture flourishes. First, we have Greek philosophy. Perhaps you've heard of Socrates. What? Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Plato is not the dough stuff. It's a dude. These are the pinnacle of Greek philosophy. And we'll take a quick look at Socrates real quick. Ignore this. This lecture has already gone on too long, so we're going to ignore this. Athenian philosophical history. Philosophy was celebrated for a long time in Athens, and true knowledge came through investigation and observation, and they were regarded with suspicion and derision. The Socratic method includes a lot of question asking, annoying cross-examination that led the opponent to admit ignorance. That's not a great way to win friends. Students of Socrates permeated the city and their families with this method, and they earned the frustration and distrust of the people. Socrates was later executed for treason against the city-state of Athens. In the wake of the Peloponnesian Wars, he was forced to drink the hemlock, the poison. His charge was for poisoning the minds of the Athenian youth. Greek art. If you remember in our culture lecture, art was, in the classical age, stately, formal. We wanted to depict pride, confidence, stability. And so we had this posture that was shown in our sculpture. Well, during this age, after the Peloponnesian Wars, culture changed. There was a shift in the feeling, and there was a shift in the arts. And so, if we zoom into these sculptures, you see something different than calm, stable, confident, strong. Here you see longing. And here, this sculpture is called pothos. This is a young man longing with desire over something, probably a young woman. And so here you see human emotion being explored through Greek art. Agony, anguish, desire, uncertainty, etc. In Greek literature, we see a change as well. Much of what I just shared with you about the Peloponnesian Wars is given to us from this age, in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian Wars. A man named Thucydides and Xenophon told us all about these things. Thucydides and Xenophon undertook actual history, chronological history, to tell their audience what happened. Herodotus was a little bit different. We're not going to get into all that. Euripides and Aristophanes are poets, and this is basically an illustration to show that the Greeks changed their focus from strength, freedom, calm, stability, to the individual human experience, the individual human emotion. Euripides and Aristophanes wrote plays that really explored these themes. And that is the end of the lecture on the Peloponnesian Wars. So, you have the Hellenic League dividing into the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League. You have the Delian League becoming, in effect, the Athenian Empire. You have the Peloponnesian League, in effect, becoming Spartan hegemony. And then you have the outbreak of war with Pericles' audacious moving of the Delian League control and treasury from Delos to Athens and builds this incredible Acropolis. And then you have the outbreak of war between Sparta and Athens. And you have Sparta conquering Athens, winning ultimately. And then you have those political developments of really Sparta losing their power, Athenian power being regained, and then a lot of back and forth. It kind of results in stasis, constant conflict, until it's finally dealt with through Philip II at the Battle of Coronea, conquering all of Athens under the banner of Macedon. Okay, that covers it. So I will see you Friday. Good day to you.